Good evening, everybody. I thought I would try and surprise everyone by starting early tonight. And I ended up starting, I think, 3 seconds late. So I guess you now have confirmation about what is on time to me, and at least early is almost on time. So welcome everybody to tonight's Q&A here and Chiefs Digest. I'm of course Matt Derrick. You see it on the screen. Assume you wouldn't be here if you didn't already know that, but I'm still I'm still a little new at the whole thing. So I may end up repeating myself. You never know. I'm also getting old too. So yes, casually late as always. I was only like 3 seconds late. See, so that was on time for me. Um, but I won't mess around with too much of a monologue tonight. I'll just get into your questions. I was never entirely sure that we would be here. The Chiefs. I've said it all along. I mean, we've been talking about it on this conversation since we started them earlier this year. That I felt all along that this was, this team after the 6-1 start, when things kind of started, stumbling around a little bit, that this team had a wide range of outcomes. That it could bow out in the first round of the playoffs to all the way to a Super Bowl win, and I've obviously have hit themselves on the high end of the distribution of outcomes. So they've made it to the Super Bowl. And I will say that I think the team that we have seen over the last month, particularly since Christmas Day, it's been a different Chiefs team. That certainly was a wake-up call. I saw someone posted this earlier, and I don't think they're entirely wrong, but it was on Twitter/X that when Willie Gay requested the swag surfing, that was the moment this team turned around. I think it was. Oh, I don't think that was the exact moment, because I think that entire game was probably that moment. That earlier in the week was probably that moment as they were preparing for the Bengals. But that was the moment that I absolutely thought that this team was getting its swagger back. That I thought that I saw a life in this team that I hadn't seen since the first month of the season. And so you heard Brett Veach talk about it. I think some of the others have talked about it too when they asked about Christmas Day and the loss of the Raiders really lighting a fire under this team. I don't think there's any doubt, and I also think there's no doubt that for some folks on this team, getting through the regular season was just going to work and punching the clock 8 to 5 every day until they got to when it really matters, and the playoffs is what matters to this team. And that's why they're doing what they're doing right now. So I already had more of a monologue than I promised I would have. So I'm just going to go into your questions, and if I get caught up, I'll tell you more. But I do see. I see. I see. I think Norman's joke there at 5:17, because I accidentally posted that the live was going to start immediately, and then I had to edit it. So I'm sorry. You're right. I did kind of. Once again, though, we go back to me being new to streaming and not being perfect all the time. So thanks for putting up with me. I appreciate it. Brandon, first one in as usual. Brandon's always in here with some good questions. What part of the game do you blame the Ravens' loss on the most? Lamar's bad decisions or their play calling in the second half? I mean, I'm going to go back to my one absolute baffling question that I have for the Ravens and Todd Monken is, what in the world happened to the run game? I mean, I get that the Chiefs' game plan was to try and put the Ravens in a position where they were going to put the ball into the hands of Lamar. They did not want Lamar to beat him with their legs. They did not want the Baltimore run game to beat them. If they were going to lose the game because Lamar threw for 300 yards and a touchdown, 4 touchdowns, they would just tip their cap to Lamar and that be it. But that was the game plan for the Chiefs, was to put that game into Lamar's hands and put it on, more specifically, on his arm. And it's always been Steve Spagnuolo's strategy going up against Lamar Jackson. And what baffled me is that the Ravens just went along with it. Gus Edwards, the 3 times he touched the ball, goes for 21 yards. uh, I thought he was absolutely just cutting through the Chiefs every time he ran it, and obviously the few times that they had some designed runs for Lamar, he was good. The one thing, and tip my cap to Jason Anderson over 810 for bringing this up, although I think it was Mike Tice's original, The Athletic, I think it was originally his note, which was that the Chiefs only gave up a positive rush all season on a blitz play once. I mean, and Lamar had a couple more than that. I mean, he was able to carve up the Chiefs defense a little bit better, but they did do a decent job at least. So I'm of keeping him from scrambling too much. But I just don't know why the Ravens just gave up on the run almost immediately. They fell behind by 7 points and all of a sudden decided that they were going to be a passing team that day. And I just don't get it. I mean, it's like they fell behind by 7 points and totally gave up their philosophy and DNA. And I don't understand that. So that's, I mean, I would be very interested to see how that game would have played out had the Ravens stuck with the run, had they given the commitment to the run, if they'd gone out there and maybe run the ball 20 times at least, designed runs. I mean, I think I probably would have run 30 times if I was the Ravens, because the run is one of the Chiefs' susceptibilities, and you do it early, you do it often, you do it until they stop it. And the fact that the Ravens just gave up on that baffled me entirely. I just did not and do not understand it. I mean, as far as the rest of it, I mean, the Chiefs have always been comfortable that if they can hem Lamar into the pocket, if they can take away his run game, they can limit the ability of him to beat them with his legs and to focus on just making sure that he stays in the pocket, doesn't have any escape lanes. They play disciplined rush football. Hey, bring a blitz, but be disciplined with it. Make sure you're in your gaps and make sure you've got contained at all times. But if you do that you're going to make Lamar uncomfortable and he will make mistakes. And that is what happened in this game. So by that, I mean, Chiefs game plan worked. That was their mission. That's what they hoped would happen. I just feel like the Ravens giving up on the run so quickly was really, a self-inflicted error. I mean, that was just baffling to me. I still don't understand why they did that. I mean, it was absolutely crazy. Um, Still baffled. Anyway, again, I'm sorry everybody about the 513 tonight. That was my bad about scheduling the Q&A early. Um, Odella, what's the title of the book you'll write after this Super Bowl win? I wish I was working on one. I am not on this one. I know the publisher that I work with. Last year I was too busy with some other projects, and so I know Pete Sweeney and over at Everhead Pride did the one last year. I don't know who they've signed up for this one. I assume that they will do one, but I'm not scheduled to do anything. If I did anything, it would be down the road. But I don't know what title would it be. I mean, I can tell you I did write because at least with my publisher, and you can see the one over that shoulder, looking at the monitor. At last, that was the one for Super Bowl 54 against the 49ers. That was the one that I wrote for my publisher. And those books come out right after the game. So, that book was out in Kansas City, 5 days after the Super Bowl. So most of it was written for the game. I mean, it was because it takes you through the entire season. So, everything, I had written everything up until that point over a couple of weeks before the Super Bowl. And then the last few chapters I wrote that night, wrote the last chapter on the bus in the parking lot after the game at 2 a.m. But so I wrote 90% of a book for Super Bowl 55 had the Chiefs won that game. And I don't think would be much of a surprise. The title of that one was Run It Back. I don't know if they're going to go with Run It Back on this one, if they manage to go back to back or not. They might just keep the title since they didn't get to use it the last time. But that would have been the title of that one. And I'm still only disappointed. I'm just disappointed in two things about that book not getting published and the Chiefs not winning Super Bowl 55. One was because my favorite chapter header was anything is possible. The fact that I was able to get that into the book was a pretty proud accomplishment of mine. And the other thing is that I had a really great story about Tyreek Hill. That I mean, I ended up adapting it for another format for Chiefs Digest, but I really liked that chapter. I really liked that story. So I was a little disappointed, but I digress. Brandon, what are your thoughts on Kelsey and Mahomes never throwing MVS under the bus this season? That's the way this team is. This team is they defend each other. I mean, they're you. I'm sure you guys have all noted that you look at the Chiefs in their warm ups, and you'll see them at the podium or see them on the field sometimes. On their left shoulder was word United. That's their word this year. You remember, what was it last year? Their theme, their kind of overarching theme that Andy Reid used was Edge. That was ended up in the Super Bowl ring. This year it's United. That's their theme. And I mean, to me, it's a perfect theme because that's how this team has always been. That's how Andy Reid expects them to be. That's how he coaches them to be, is united as one. So, I mean, to me, that's exactly how this team has been. I mean, they're never going to throw each other under the bus. I mean, there's never going to be anything like that. And if there is, there's consequences. And that's why, I mean, the whole thing with Kadarius Tony, I'm sure somebody's going to ask about that, and we'll get into that later if anybody does. But they're never going to throw MVS under the bus. I mean, they stick together. I mean, and that's what good teams do. When you've got a teammate who's down, you don't kick them. You try and bring them up. You try to encourage them, and that's how this team was, because they also know, and I mean, and I can see this from the inside, and that's why I'm happy for MVS that he's had a couple of moments like this in the postseason, because he would be just like that. I mean, he's not going to throw a teammate under the bus, and I know some people thought that he was kind of maybe, showing up Mahomes a couple of weeks ago when there was a pass that was behind him. I'm very confident that was not his intention, and that's not what he was trying to do. Because Marquez, for whatever you may think of him, and I mean, I'll get into this a little bit. I mean, because I think that Marquez is built to be positive to a certain way, that to smile through adversity, to not hang his hat, but to be proud, and project confidence. I mean, I think that's probably one. I think a lot of NFL players are like that, probably a lot of professional athletes, because, you probably have to have a little bit of that in you, in order to succeed, that you can't let failure, stop you. You can't let it bring you down. So I get a little bit of that, and so maybe that comes across as bravado, maybe it comes across as false confidence sometimes, but that's just how football players are, and that's how MVS is. MVS is, I mean, I've never seen Marquez ever, badmouth a teammate or anything of that nature. He is well liked in that locker room. He's got a lot of friends, and their team. I mean, that's what teammates do. I mean, they do take care of each other, especially never more than when they're down. I mean, that's when you want to try and bring somebody up the most. So it's never surprised me that, hey, Kelsey and Mahomes always express confidence in Marquez. Mahomes saying he's always going to throw to him. Hey, they have said the same thing about Kadarius through that whole, saga as well. So I'm not surprised by any of it, and that's why I'm happy for him. It's just trying to be an objective observer here. When you see somebody who's gone through the struggles that Marquez has this season, and to come out the other side and have some good moments, I mean, I think you all should be happy for him and appreciate it. I mean, he was a big part of your Super Bowl run last year. He's obviously been a big part this year. I mean, I think you can safely say between those two catches last week and the one this week for sure, Chiefs might not win a Super Bowl without Marquez. So be happy. I mean, he might not be back next year. I mean, we don't know, but I say, hey, try and be optimistic, especially if you win a ring. There's no reason you can't be magnanimous and just say, hey, Marquez, you tried your best. You did your best. I know it always didn't maybe look like that, but I can tell you, from the inside, he did work hard. There's no doubt about that. I mean, his teammates wouldn't feel the way that they did. He wouldn't have the friends that he has on this team if there wasn't some good feelings there. So that is me getting off my soapbox about Marquez. So, but your mileage may vary. You can have a different opinion. That's okay. Cody, how do you think the meeting between Andy and Kadarius is going to go? And is he still in this team next year? If so, is it probationary? I mean, I've said all along that I felt like Kadarius was going to be back with this team next year, at least, given the opportunity to compete, because financially it doesn't make a whole lot of sense not to. He is under control for one more season under his rookie contract at a very affordable rate. I mean, I keep saying it's 2.5. I think it's maybe 2.4. Let me look it up real quick so I can tell you for sure. But I was right. 2.53 million for next year. It's a guaranteed number. So, I mean, he has a 5th-year option. I doubt the Chiefs will be picking that up. But, and he's very affordable. So, and you're going to pay the money anyway. So why just cut him and walk away? Well, he may make that impossible. We will see what comes of all of this. What Kadarius does say at some point when he speaks out about this, if he apologizes, if he says he misspoke. I mean, as I said on Saturday or Sunday rather, before the game, during the inactives broadcast, I mean, we've been down this road before with Kadarius, that there have been some things on social media that then he says it wasn't him and distanced himself from his comments. So the same thing may happen again. Maybe he'll apologize. I don't know. I mean, what's the next step is probably going to be Kadarius's. I mean, it's possible the Chiefs will make that step for him. I do think it's a distraction this team doesn't need right now. So I think that they really need to address it before they get on the plane Sunday, because anybody who's on the active roster, even the practice squad guys, are supposed to be available to the media next week during those 4 availabilities. I mean, they've got opening night, and then they got availabilities Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and everybody's supposed to be available for them. I just don't know if you want Kadarius to be a part of that if he has not addressed this yet, because he's going to get descended upon by not just Kansas City media, but all across the country. And New York media will be there too, because he's a New Yorker and a Giant, and they'll want to, put another bow on that story. So it's not going away. I mean, it's just going to get worse. So the question is, what do you want, for Tony to be? I mean, do you want his first, chance to speak on this to be next week, or do you want him to be able to say, hey, you know what, I already addressed that, so why don't you refer to what I said on Friday? I mean, that's the position that you need to be in from a PR standpoint. So now there are always other possibilities, and I don't know what the Chiefs are going to do. They obviously could put him on injured reserve. There's other potentials. I mean, they could release him. I don't think that will happen, but there's a non-zero chance that it could. I mean, I still think that the most logical, or at least the most likely outcome is the most, the Occam's razor concept, that the most probable outcome is the most likely. And most probable outcome is that Kadarius is very cheap, and, there's no reason not to hold on to him for a while, because if you release him now, I mean, there's no chance of redemption. There's no chance that you're going to getting anything out of him again. No chance you could even salvage a draft pick out of him. So now, if you think you can't close the door on this, and you're afraid that it's going to put a shadow over your Super Bowl week plans next week, then yeah, I mean, maybe you do. But I like I said, I mean, I think that the next step is in Kadarius's hands. He's got to address this one way or the other. If he doesn't, then maybe the Chiefs have to make that decision for him. But I just don't see how he can get on that plane on Sunday and take part in these media activities unless he's put this behind him yet. Matthew, is there any chance we could get Brian Cook back for the Super Bowl? Any news there? I would say probably less than 10% chance. I would be very surprised. We should get an indication on Thursday for sure. If he practices and is designated to return from IR on Thursday, then that would be an indication that, hey, there's a chance. I don't think that's going to happen. It certainly seems at this point that even though the Chiefs were optimistic that that was going to be an injury that he could come back from, that maybe it was going to be 5 or 6 weeks, which would make the Super Bowl possible. Even though the Chiefs haven't said anything yet, at least the indications that I've been getting, and I think even from parsing some of the things that Andy Reid has said, they've been less optimistic about Brian. So, like I said, I would say less than 10% chance for Brian Cook to come back. I don't, like I said, not zero chance, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think he would be 100%, and I think that would come down to it is that the Chiefs will want to put guys out there who are 100%, and Brian Cook probably wouldn't be at this point. So I'm not feeling good about it, but you will know Thursday. If he practices Thursday, there's a chance. If he does not practice Thursday, there is no chance. To me, in my book, in my book, it will then go down to 0% chance if he's not practicing on Thursday. So, Jack, great supporter. Thank you, Jack, as always, for being here. Any Frank Clark rumors? Nothing that I've heard. I mean, I know there's a lot of speculation out there. Hasn't been anything hard info-wise to me that says that it's a possibility. There's still time. I mean, the Chiefs, Tuesday and Wednesday are 2 days off for the players, so they don't get back until Thursday. Obviously, the Chiefs could squeeze him onto the practice squad for a period of time. They could even, if they made a roster move somewhere else, they could get. I mean, Charles Omenihu certainly at this point looks like he's not playing in the Super Bowl, unfortunately. So there would be a spot there for him if they needed to get him onto the 53, because Frank wouldn't maybe come here if he wasn't on the 53. So it's still possible. I just think that to a degree that the Chiefs may have moved on and don't want to go back down that road again. I'm not. I kind of get it from a player standpoint, because I think that the fact that Frank's available tells you that there's probably a lot of teams around the league that feel like that, yeah, maybe Frank's time has passed. He hasn't been out there in the field for a while. So, hey, getting him out there just for the Super Bowl, I wouldn't mind having him if I'm the Chiefs. And I think in that locker room, I wouldn't mind having Frank back. I mean, he's always been a popular player. He's been a good player. Just having his presence around might be a good thing. It wouldn't at this point cost you anything. I mean, like I said, you've got a roster spot that's available, so you could be available, so you're not missing anything by, bringing in Frank. But I could see them also at the same time thinking maybe it would be just a little bit of a distraction, because, if Frank does come in, then I mean he's going to talk, and even though I love when Frank talks and he's great, maybe they just don't want that big of a personality coming in at this point, at this time. Really. Your die is kind of cast as a team, and you wouldn't necessarily want to bring in somebody. I mean, Frank is an exception because he's been with this team for a while. They know him, they're comfortable with him. I just don't know how comfortable maybe the Chiefs front office and coaching staff is, because Frank's always been kind of a loose cannon, and even though Chris loves him, and I don't know anybody that doesn't love Frank in the organization, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't make them nervous sometimes. So hey, maybe having him around wouldn't offset some of the other concerns that they might have, just because Frank is Frank. But I've always thought he's been a good influence, despite the off the field issues that's obviously been sometimes a problem. Frank inside that building never caused any problems. So I don't know. We'll see. It's probably more time than I should have spent on Frank, but I liked him. I mean, he was a good guy off the field, and from that standpoint, and at least to us. I mean, I never remember. He wasn't driving with him in a car and anything, so I can't say too much, I guess. But Frank was always good to us, at least in the locker rooms and to the media. And I know he's got a lot of friends and he's popular in that team for a reason. So going to Brandon, there was another question. Personal surprises from this season. Good question. I mean, I have this in my back of my head from time to time, and was actually thinking about kind of doing a story about this, about just some of the things that popped up. And so I should have a ready list on the top of my head. I think probably to me, the biggest surprise was the receiver group and just not coming through the way that we thought. there were some things that I expected. I mean, if you've listened to me for a while, I was preaching patience on Justin Ross for a long time because I just felt like that he had a lot of maturing as a player and a receiver to go through. I felt like that, the amount of football that he's played in the last 2 or 3 years was going to require some patience. So him not becoming a star, I mean, I did not think that was going to happen. I mean, he had about the season that I thought he might have, honestly. I mean, I didn't think, I mean, if he became a 400-yard receiver this year, I would have said that was an outstanding success. I mean, I would have thought that under 200 was certainly kind of my expectation because I really thought that he was just going to be a fairly limited player. So, I mean, he may have even under exceeded my low expectations, but he wasn't the biggest surprise. I mean, obviously, Marquez not being as reliable as he has been in the past. I mean, this guy has just been a, 500 to 700-yard machine. And the Chiefs were obviously asking him to do more than he did in Green Bay. We're hoping that he would become a bigger player than he was. And that didn't happen, last year. I mean, I think he kind of showed that, hey, a 600, 700-yard season, that's what you're going to get from Marquez. And I certainly expected the same. I thought he would easily hit 600 yards. So for him to have the struggles that he did this season, that really surprised me. I really thought Sky Moore was going to break out. I thought that, from everything that we saw during OTAs and training camp, I thought he looked like a different guy, confidence-wise. Everything looked crisper from him, snaps, just routes, everything. I really thought you were going to see a big breakthrough from him. And it really surprised me that it didn't come through. And I don't know why it didn't. I don't know that the Chiefs really understand why that it didn't. I mean, obviously there was the injury at the end of the year that limited him, but I thought there was a real chance that Sky could. I mean, I'd say 500 yards was at least my bare minimum for Sky, and I thought 600 to 800 would have been a really good season for him. So the fact that he just didn't develop really surprised me. Like I said, that entire receiver room, just, what it ended up being. I think about the only player that I think you would say to me met expectations is probably Justin Watson. I mean, he's kind of been the guy that he is, and he's stuck in there. So that's about it. I mean, the rest of that room, going through the names, starting to think. I mean, McCole coming back. I mean, thought he might make more of an impact. Richie James is another one that I thought was absolutely going to make a bigger impact, but didn't. So yeah, those I think would be my big ones. Definitely Marquez and Sky and that receiver room in general. But with that, I'm going to bring in our good friend Nick Jacobs.
Hi.
Nick, how in the heck are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm just promoting this out here. Hold on. Trying to figure out. Save changes. Okay, and we're good. Okay, I'm here.
Okay, I see a baseball image on your shirt, but
all right, yeah. We'll do the shirt reveal. It says touchdown. I feel like a sports producer should have a shirt like that. That's all I'm saying.
You really should. I mean,
you gotta let people know that you're aware of sports and you have it all figured out with baseball meshing with football. And I mean, a home run could be considered a touchdown.
There you go.
You got to throw people a curveball, Matt. Okay.
I think that's a grand slam in my book, Nick.
Nailed it. That is a 3-pointer right there.
I know you, and I'll ask you about it here in a minute, but because I know you just got finished rewatching the Ravens game and doing your takeaways and your eye in the sky on X/Twitter. So I know there'll be some questions about that, and I want to get to it. But this is a great question for us to start off with you, because you and I off air often talk about the machinations behind the scenes and the coaching staff and who may come and go. And Marcus, thank you for the support. That is extremely kind of you. I appreciate that. Any chance that Nagy, Spags, or anyone else important gets poached after the Super Bowl? I mean, I've always been surprised that this organization hasn't been rated more. And, and I know that Maybe there's going to be a body or two that leaves the front office. There's obviously been some scuttlebutt there. Um, Coaching staff, I don't know. I mean, I think that Spags, if he wanted a head coaching job, should absolutely be considered for one. I just don't think that anybody's in the market for it right now. And I think that's dumb thinking, but because the funny thing to me, Nick, is that right now everybody seems to once again be looking for the offensive wonderkind of the world when right now the pendulum is swinging. The pendulum is swinging back towards the defense. And you're in an era now where it's probably the next couple of years, it's going to be defensive-minded teams, or at least teams that play really good defense that are going to win a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with the Commanders and Seahawks over the next 2 weeks, because the fact nobody interviewed Matt Nagy or interviewed Steve Spagnuolo before those windows closed, they're going to have to wait till after the Super Bowl. So, I mean, if those jobs end up staying vacant during that time, then, I mean, I would say anything's on the table about, if Nagy and Spagnuolo both win a Super Bowl with the Chiefs, especially Spagnuolo, with how many Super Bowls he's won at this point by being a defensive coordinator, and what he did against Tom Brady and what he's done this year against the league and what he's done with some of the Chiefs defenses that didn't necessarily have as elite of characteristics as this one does. But part of the reason this defense is so good is because of Dave Merritt and because of Joe Cullen. And they've got players on this roster that fit the characteristics of what Steve Spagnuolo wants in a scheme. So if he goes somewhere, does that general manager share the same vision or is able to recognize what he needs scheme-wise to be successful? Because if they don't, then what he had as a defensive coordinator in Kansas City may not be able to be duplicated, and replicated in any way, shape, or form. So then the other part of it is the benefit that Matt Nagy and Steve Spagnuolo both have is they've been head coaches before. So they wouldn't go in the second time, wide-eyed trying to figure out the world. Because here's the best way I can say it. Right now, you have two different styles when it comes to coaching. You either have people that are the X's and O's coaches that just kind of guide their way through it, kind of like the Sean McVays of the world and Mike McDaniels of the world, and those guys that are really, some of them are really smart at putting a scheme together, but then they have to have equally smart defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator on the opposite side of them that can focus on that and essentially be the manager or CEO of that, and they leave them alone and they focus on their expertise. And then they have somebody on their side of the ball that helps assist them if they have to be a head coach. For somebody like Andy Reid and Bill Belichick in this instance, they both have mastered being able to be the CEO of a football team, commanding the vision of what it is, what they want, what is successful in building a football team, what is successful characteristic-wise, how do you get guys to buy in, how do you teach players your scheme and get them to completely buy into it. That takes time, especially when you're a head coach and you're the one in charge of it. You have to really observe the most successful coaches and hopefully have been on their staffs to be able to see those different teaching styles and figure out ways to do that and navigate the unexpected. Maybe a player posts something on Instagram that you have to answer. Maybe a player says something in the media that you got to kind of have to deflect. And then you deal with even more unexpected things that you won't even think of in a day that, kind of derail things. So Matt Nagy's been through that. Steve Spagnuolo's been through that. So that's part of that appeal. Then the next part of it becomes when you interview them, what is their vision of a team? And for them, what I'll say for them is when they're talking to an owner, what is the owner's vision of a team? Does it align with what you're wanting to do? Is the owner willing to spend the money that you need at the positions that you think are important and the characteristics that are important? So it's got to be, for somebody like Steve Spagnuolo, it's got to be a good back and forth. And that's what Bill Belichick was doing down in Atlanta, is he was seeing if they matched in philosophically what Bill Belichick wants to bring there, what he can create there, and how he can go about approaching that. But let's be blunt, If Bill Belichick comes in, there's a lot of people in that front office that aren't going to be there. And some of them were able to get in the owner's ear, tell them that it isn't worth it. And the owner chose the front office over Bill Belichick in the vision that he had. So that's, we'll see how that plays out over the next couple of years. But, I mean, if somebody like Raheem Morris, he'd been there before. Clearly the front office was comfortable with him, and they went with him. And we'll see if they're successful or not. I'm not going to say that they're not going to be. It's just they chose the path that gave them job security.
Yeah, and I'm, you mentioned the two guys I think for sure that are ones that you have to watch, because if I thought the Chiefs coaching staff was going to get poached, I think it would be Dave Merritt or Joe Cullen. And I don't think it's going to happen with Dave Merritt, because he's been pretty upfront that he wants his kids to get through high school and everything before he starts, doing an upwardly mobile climb up the ladder. And he still has time. He's still a relatively young guy as coaching terms go. Joe's 56 and has only had the one defensive coordinator job, and that was in the cursed Jacksonville Jaguars 2021 season that he should not be blamed for whatsoever, because that was when Urban Meyer, imploded on impact. Nothing was going to salvage that season. But there's no doubt. I mean, Joe Cullen has been, an absolute wonder with this team. And what he's done with the defensive line and the buy-in that he's got, there's no doubt he ticks, a lot of boxes for me as far as what we have seen publicly. Obviously, and for a defensive coordinator, do you have to have you have to be detailed? Do you have to have as much of a plan and a vision as you do for being a head coach? No, I think you still want your defensive coordinator still have the ability to manage the big picture, though. But from all those aspects, Joe Cullen seems like to me that he would be an outstanding defensive coordinator with the right staff around him and the right head coach. And we know Urban Meyer was not that head coach for anybody. Mm-hmm. So, but Spags is the interesting one, because I think that obviously from what he's done with these defense, he deserves it. And you're right. He had the first time around in St. Louis that didn't go right. I imagine he learned a lot that he would do differently the second time around. He's older, he's more experienced. So, I think that he would still be worthy of a second chance. I just don't know if anybody's willing to do that with him. And for Nags, though, I think it's that he probably needs a little bit more of the Andy Reid stink on him and a good season. This offense, the season that it had, there's nobody out there that's going to say, well, hey, Matt Nagy's the wonder kid that we need to get from the Chiefs, because the offense didn't have a very good year. So there's probably not going to be a lot of guys on the offensive side that's going to get poached. But I would think I don't see how you can't look at that defense, though, and say to yourself, wait a minute, there's some guys on that staff that we might need to talk about. Even giving promotions, make them give them a bigger title bump and bring them in to do what they're doing now for another team. That's always a possible move. And the front office too. There might be a player or a person or two that leaves the front office, wouldn't surprise me, but the continuity of this organization, though, has surprised me over the years.
Yeah, it's a good thing to have. It's a good problem to have right now. So have that problem as long as you can. If you got to give pay raises like the Texans did today for their OC and their QB coach to come back, or promoted titles, or what you got to do. And if you're a coach on staff, I guess in the bigger picture, why would you want to leave for a much more unstable franchise when you could go win another Super Bowl instead and have fun and have less stress than what you're going to have as a head coach? I know that may sound bad. People are like, well, there's only so many head coaching jobs in the world. Nagy and Spagnuolo have already done that. They know it's not cracked up. They jumped at that first chance and it burned both of them. So if I'm in their shoes, you take the right opportunity if it comes along. You just don't take a opportunity because you already did that before, and it led both of you back to joining Andy Reid. And that's not a negative. It's just like you came back to where, it was a fun experience, because they wouldn't have come back if they didn't enjoy working with Andy.
That is true. So, Mark, it's a good question. You've really got Nick and I on a little bit of a segue there. So we took the scenic tour.
I can't ride a segue, Matt. I don't have the balance for it.
Boom. I'll probably pass this one mostly to you, because I kind of, I was asked a little bit earlier about, and maybe this is the exact one that I answered, and I'm just not remembering well. But Brandon was asking personal surprises from this season. What's the biggest surprise to you about this season that stands out?
I mean, what they did in this playoff run, running through the gauntlets that they did, playing in extreme, cold against the Dolphins, slowing the Dolphins down the way that they did, then going into Buffalo and being able to rise above it and be able to really kind of get the best of Buffalo, and then being able to go into Baltimore against a physical defense where that you played almost 3 times as many snaps as, and to go in there and hold your own the way that they did, that 3-week span was really impressive, and how far they came from that Christmas Day game to where they are now, and how they really have hit their stride and what they can do to be successful with the offense that they have. Like, I think that's kind of where the biggest surprise is, because if you all think back to that Christmas Day game, how lifeless it looked, how uninspired it looked, how distracted they looked, and how worn down that they looked overall, you weren't sure if that team continued on that path. You weren't even sure if they were going to make the playoffs, because that was kind of in doubt right after their Christmas game. But then they bounced back, started to finally be efficient against the Bengals. Then they took that week of rest, and then they really turned it on in the Dolphins game and built on what they did against the Bengals. So, I mean, looking at it from that perspective, I think that's the biggest part overall. I would say the bummer part of it was how at training camp the receivers, the depth looked more promising overall, but it just for whatever reason it just never really came together. And that's the one part of this offense, no matter what the Chiefs do, that's the one position group that they're really going to have to adjust to be able to keep up with how teams are going to try to match what the Chiefs are doing, and for the Chiefs to kind of continue to stay ahead and continue to evolve. Like, the Chiefs know where they got to get to, but the cool thing about them is they know how to win with what they have.
Yeah, I cannot disagree with you there. And Brandon had a follow-up question, and since that was the question I was answering when you came in, Nick, and because my surprise on the season was just how the receiver room didn't develop the way anybody anticipated. But Brandon followed up with, what were your biggest takeaways entering the season? And, what were your expectations and how it followed through from training camp through the season? And I mean, I had this team at kind of I was vacillating between 12-5 and 13-4. I mean, even with the difficulty of the schedule, I thought 13-4. I mean, 14-3. It was not an outside possibility in my book. So getting to 11-6 was a surprise to me. I mean, especially at 6-1, you certainly thought that this team had more opportunities there. But obviously they had troubles, adjusting to certain things. Obviously some new faces. I think that, they had troubles adjusting to offensively. They had some troubles adjusting to just the looks of the league and what some of the defensive schemes that are out there right now, what some of the like I said, the pendulum is swinging, and I don't think that we're talking enough about that, and just the defenses are catching up with spread concepts around the league. But I mean, I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, as far as, my biggest takeaway about this team is this season is going to always begin and end with the defense. I think in retrospect, looking back at it, I thought that, Andy Reid talking about those windows being smaller, the zones and training camp was coach speak. But it was also the most, in retrospect, difficult training camp that Patrick Mahomes has ever had in Kansas City. So maybe we should have seen this coming, but biggest takeaway for me was that this was a fantastic defense. Was it the best Chiefs defense ever? I mean, I still love some of those 90s defenses and just their ability to take the football away and just absolutely at moments just take over a game. I mean, some of those defenses I think were the best in the NFL. This was a really good defense. I mean, statistically, I know it was number 2, but they were also on the field Sunday with the number 1 defense in the league, and I think that the Chiefs had a better defense on Sunday. So What about you? What are your big takeaways?
I mean, going in the year when I looked at the schedule in May, I wrote an article on KSHB 41, and I had them going 13-4. So they lost 2 more than I thought they did when I looked at them on paper in May. So, I mean, there isn't a ton that's different from what I was kind of expecting with what's on paper. Because I mean, look, this team's, as long as they don't have injuries to certain key players, like this team is typically going to find its way into the playoffs. And technically right now, under Patrick Mahomes as a quarterback, they still haven't missed an AFC championship game. So, I mean, like that's the bar right now. Whether it's fair or unfair, that's kind of the bar that Mahomes has set. So, I mean, like that's what you're expecting at this point. So, I don't see how, from an expectation perspective, how anything would change, other than if injuries happen, you're like, well, I'm not going to speak any certain thing into existence because season's still going on, and I'm not going to put that out there. But I'm saying there are certain injuries that derail this team pretty quickly, and you're just thankful that doesn't happen, and that individual works on a lot of flexibility to keep that from happening.
Yeah, you're saying what I guess I should not verbalize, so I won't say it. If I said it, I would knock on wood. So, but I won't even do that. I think we all know what you're suggesting at Nick.
I never said a name, so I didn't put that out in the universe.
But I mean, you know what? This season has adjusted for me what my expectations will be going forward, because I mean, hey, I know the Patriots seem to run through every season like 14-2, 13-3, maybe a down year it was 12-4. Well, it helped that for most of that run they had 6 easy wins, because the AFC East during most of that put up zero fight whatsoever against the Patriots. And bless their hearts, I mean, even though the AFC West has its problems, I think it's better right now than most of those years were, between like say 2001 and 2012. I mean, good God. I mean, at one time, the biggest challenger to Tom Brady in the AFC East was Mark Sanchez. I mean, come on. I think right now, I mean, the AFC West is much more conditioned to, put up the fight against the Chiefs than they have been in the last few years for sure. So I don't think the Chiefs are necessarily going to run through the AFC West, 6-0 every season. I think it's going to be tougher for them. But I think also that Andy Reid gets that it's a 17-game season. And, for him, it's a 20 or a 21-game season. That's what he's thinking about. So I think, I mean, it would not surprise me that if at some point in the near future, that if the Chiefs were like 7-1 at some point, you might just give guys a week off here and there, because I just don't think that the regular season matters. I know that you want to for this playoff structure. I get how important the number 1 seed is, and you'd love to have that every year. So you're going to try and get that. But this team, as it's constituted, has a lot of guys on it, and I don't think this is wrong thinking, that only care about the playoffs. And the 17-game season is just simply punching in the clock every day for an 8-5 before you get to where what you're really getting paid for. And I get that. So, I mean, if you had to just say the Chiefs were going to, be 11-6 every single year, I think you'd take it, because you just know that this group, once the lights come on in January, is more often than not going to show up.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So
Nick's not going to co-sign on any of that. That's okay.
already answered it.
Karate Kid. Any chance we see Buggs called up? Isaiah Buggs, big defensive tackle. Talked to him in the locker room last week. He seems like a very likable young man. A lot of fun to talk to. He's really enjoying being in Kansas City. I mean, I think he'd be ready. He's been here long enough, but I don't sense that the Chiefs are probably going to go that direction. I mean, they've been playing Mike Pennel throughout the playoffs. I would assume that Mike Pennel will absolutely be a practice squad elevation, unless they were to, give him Charles Omenihu's roster spot. That might go to somebody else. You never know. Maybe just keep Charles there for loyalty's sake. You never know. but I don't think he'll get it. I mean, I think the Chiefs, made the acquisition of Isaiah more with an eye towards next year, and doesn't bother me at all. I mean, he's certainly, I think, got a lot of talent, a lot of potential. Anything you see, Nick? You think there's a chance he could play?
I mean, like I said last week and was asked, that's a 2024 move to put him in a one tech spot, give him a whole off season to work with him. So, I mean, I like how big of a body he is and how he could help clog up in the run defense. But if they were able to get by with the Ravens, and how good that run team was, then I don't see them leapfrogging him above Neil Farrell, who they actually, if I remember correctly, started. Or not started, but they activated for his first game this year. I don't see this team's not big on leapfrogging. I know somebody's already brought it up, Frank Clark, multiple times. If you bring back Frank Clark and you put him on the Super Bowl roster for Felix Uzama and BJ Thompson that put in that work all year, it's not a good look and it's not ideal. So to bring Frank on just to help with the Super Bowl, I don't. If that was going to happen, I think that happens earlier in the year, so he can be a part of it and integrate himself. But just to put him on for a mercenary Super Bowl run again, I don't anticipate that happening because Malik Herring did most of the snaps. Him and Mike Dana rotated in on those snaps for a minute whenever he was out.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I talked about earlier that, hey, Frank is well liked in that locker room and the organization, so it wouldn't be a surprise to me. But everything that you just said absolutely rings true in that, bringing in somebody that, hasn't been here, who hasn't worked, who hasn't put that in, is not something that this organization would typically do. And honestly, I mean, as much as we all liked Frank here, if the Chiefs and other NFL teams felt like Frank was at a point where he can contribute, he would have been on a roster at the end of the season. So I think that probably speaks a lot of volume about that. This is kind of related to what we're talking about there, though. Sharon's asking the thoughts on the defensive line with Omenihu and Nadi out, and especially with Felix Anudike-Uzama's capacity to step up. I mean, I think it's obviously it's a everybody moves up one kind of a situation. I mean, I would expect that Felix would be active in place of Omenihu. I mean, they do have other options they could go, but it's the Super Bowl and it's all hands on deck. And to my way of thinking, it's more than likely. I mean, if Charles Omenihu isn't going to play, Felix absolutely can take some of those snaps, but I think that most of them are probably just going to go to George Karlaftis, Mike Dana, Chris Jones is going to play on the edge a little bit. You're going to go with the guys who you've been going with because there's no tomorrow. I mean, you can play your defensive. If you want to play George Karlaftis 100% of the snaps, I might push back a little bit because that's a little much, but you're going to leave it all on the field, Nick. There's no load management in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think you're see a combination of Mike Dana and Malik Herring on rundowns, so they did it against the Ravens, and then on passing downs, they're probably going to try to see if they can sneak Felix in on that, and then kick either Dana or Herring or Wharton inside to rush with Chris Jones, and that'll be how that'll go. And Karlaftis is probably going to play most of the snaps on the other side, and we'll see if they have BJ Thompson in for a little bit of it or not.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the other potential. I mean, I would imagine. I mean, and this is the thing I've been asked about a little bit is, do the Chiefs trust Felix? And I mean, I feel like that they do, and that the biggest reason why he hasn't been playing more than anything else is just simply there are other guys who have earned the role. I mean, are you going to take away snaps from George Karlaftis and Mike Dana and Charles Omenihu just to give him to Felix? No, I mean, he's where he's at on the depth chart for a reason, and that's not necessarily reflective of Felix, but it's just reflective of the fact that that's a really, really deep group. They drafted him with 2024 in mind, and I mean, if you get some snaps in the Super Bowl, great, but that's not what you had to do this year. So you're going to go with the guys who are going to help you win, and hey, if Felix gives you some fresh legs, great, but no matter how much or how little he plays, I don't think it says as much about Felix's situation as much as it does about, hey, they got some other guys that can play.
It shouldn't, but since he's a first round pick, everybody's going to obsess about it, and
I
everybody's going
get
to say
that.
that he's a bust and this and that, and that's just how it's going to go. So,
But you know
look, I mean,
what?
he's
I
going to.
mean, that's the thing. You got a Super Bowl roster. Every once in a while, you're gonna have a first round pick that doesn't play because you're a pretty good team.
Again, I've already accepted it in my mentions. Already accepted how it's going to go. That's how it's going to be, and we'll move forward.
We will move forward. I won't put you on the spot here, Nick, but I don't want to ever be accused of ducking any questions or anything. So,
Yeah.
but Chief KT, do you think the Chief after the Patriots game, the Chiefs decided to bench Tony? I mean, I get the conspiracy theory. I mean, and until somebody wants to put their name next to it, you know, I'll put it into that category. It would be very unlike, I think, the Chiefs organization to put a guy on the injury report that long with an injury that he didn't have. There's plenty of ways that could get him into trouble and be an issue. So and he practiced that week. I mean, it was an issue where it popped up on Saturday that he put him. I mean, they were certainly that week giving all indication that he was going to play. So I don't think it was the decision to initially bench him, but they're also not going to put a guy out there who's not, capable physically of giving 100%. And if that's where Kadarius Tony is, that's where the Chiefs believe he is, he wasn't going to play. So I don't know. I mean, like I said, until somebody puts their name to it, I'm not gonna buy into it. But I know there's obviously speculation out there that was their decision. But I will at this point. I'll take Andy Reid at face value. Let's put it this way, before I necessarily take Kadarius Tony at face value.
Look, I mean, I'm going to tackle this twofold, and I'm not really going to hold back on this. First part is the offense has been better without his presence in it. Like they're stable, they know their roles, they're able to be effective, and they're not trying to force a football to him in any way, shape, or form, no matter how much athletic ability he has. So you've eliminated that situation from the equation. You're not having to worry about is he going to bobble the ball and forcing an interception. And so now you don't have to worry about that part of it. And when a player comes in to see a trainer about whatever issue it may be, like they have to put that on the injury report. That's what that's supposed to be. So he obviously came in and saw them at some point about not only a hip, but an ankle. And he's hurt half the time anyways, whether he's with New York or Kansas City. So I'm not surprised that he's on the injury report. That's actually, I would be more surprised if he wasn't. That's just that's what's happened in his career, and that's who he is. And with him going on Instagram and doing or potentially if that was him on Instagram, whatever the heck it was, sounded like him, but not a guarantee that it is. Never know. So, but to go in and do that, that's somebody preparing for their next venture and their next stop and trying to make it sound like they're not an injury-prone player, even though history says otherwise. And if teams want to do a physical, they can, and they'll find out what answer they want. So personally for me, I've mentally moved on from all that noise, that situation, whatever. If they want to put him on IR and move on after this season, go for it. Because they're going to have to replace him either way. And even if he's on the roster next year, he's going to get hurt at some point. He's going to miss 8 games, and that's just going to be that. So, I mean, like, I don't know, Matt. I'm just at a point where, like, 1, they won the AFC Championship. 2, they're going back to the Super Bowl. And that you're at a point where if you don't trust them to be able to put themselves in a position to exceed and not have all the freakouts anymore, then I don't know what to tell you. They've taken you to 6 consecutive AFC championships, and no other coach or GM combination or quarterback combination in franchise history has done that. There's really not much else they can do to prove to you that you should probably trust them.
Well, I'm going to give a very meta answer, which is to give the exact same answer that I said earlier today that Kadarius Tony needs to do, because I think if the Chiefs are going to take Kadarius Tony to Las Vegas and he's going to be on the plane on Sunday, he needs to come out to the media on Thursday or Friday during the media availabilities, probably Friday since that's take out the trash day. But put him out there, answer the questions, tell whatever side of the story, what version of the story he wants to tell. And next week at the 4 media availabilities, when everybody comes up and you're Kadarius Tony, you just say, refer back to what I said earlier. So that's my short answer. Refer back to what I said about Kadarius Tony 45 minutes ago. That's my answer. And that's what Kadarius Tony should say too.
Yeah, I doubt that's what happens if he does.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that either. JT, will we get McKinnon back for the Super Bowl? I'm going to hedge a little bit on this because everything that my brain tells me and everything that I know about his injury and what's been said would tell me that there is zero chance that Jerick McKinnon can play into the Super Bowl because he just had surgery for a core muscle injury on January 2nd. And usually the best recoveries for those things is 6 weeks. So even practicing this week would be a little bit of a stretch. But I only pause because normally guys who have had surgery and are not close to coming back, and I'll bring Brian Cook's name into this part of the conversation. They're not around. I mean, they're not on the field during practice. They're getting rehab, and sometimes they're at home. I mean, sometimes they have a different schedule than the players because they're in the rehab rooms. They're getting their treatment sometimes when the players are on the field that are active. I mean, that's how you just have to manage your resources. So sometimes they're getting their work done. Sometimes they do their rehab elsewhere. I mean, the team outsources them to send them somewhere else. I mean, there's a lot of different things. So, but that's why you don't see them. I mean, we haven't seen Brian Cook since his injury, and that's most likely because Brian Cook is either rehabbing elsewhere or he's rehabbing at a time when the other players are not in the room. So that's his deal. Jerick McKinnon has been around now for a couple of weeks, and he's been on the field at least watching practice, and that is just not normally the behavior of a guy who is on IR and not coming back. I mean, that's usually what somebody who is coming back is. But I also know that McKinnon loves this team and he wants to be around. So maybe I'm reading way too much into it. I don't know, but I still think it's very unlikely he comes back for the Super Bowl. But like Brian Cook, we'll know Thursday. Anybody who practices Thursday has a chance, but if they're not practicing Thursday, there's zero chance that they're coming back.
Yeah, I mean, when I asked Coach Reed about both of them before the playoffs began, and it didn't seem like it was optimistic for it. So I mean, mentally, I've just prepared since then that they're unfortunately not going to be back for the playoff run. So mentally, my brain, that's another one of those things, Matt. I've just kind of accepted.
Dr. Ozzy has a question that I actually have been asking myself. And I wish I could ask Spags in just this wording, but you kind of have to be a little bit more circumspect. Is Steve Spagnuolo salivating about what he's about to do to Brock Purdy?
I mean,
would you be?
He went against Tua. He went against Josh Allen, who's the best quarterback he's going to face from the playoffs. He went against Lamar, who was the best scrambling quarterback he's going to face from the playoffs. So the Chiefs defense has already played probably the two of the best quarterbacks they were going to play in that span of the playoffs. I know Brock Purdy's the system quarterback, and he knows how to do, and he's a good quarterback, knows how to manage, can run the system and everything. And a Shanahan system's been around for quite some time. But what I think the bigger question is how does the Chiefs run defense do against the 49ers? That's going to determine a lot of what Brock Purdy can and can't do from a play action perspective and how he can and can't move around. So that you're going to have to keep that run in check to get done what you want. And I mean, technically, Spagnuolo and them saw Brock Purdy at the end of their game from last year when they played the Niners out in San Francisco. So they have a little piece of that puzzle, and he's got a little piece of what he's going to experience against the Chiefs. But look, you're giving Steve Spagnuolo 2 weeks to prepare. You're giving Andy Reid 2 weeks to prepare. Those are guys you don't want having a lot of time to prepare for you. Doesn't mean Kyle Shanahan won't have some cool things to do either.
True.
I'm just telling you, Steve Spagnuolo is not a guy you want to give 2 weeks to.
No. And I will say, I mean, Spags is not necessarily, wouldn't say salivating, because the reason why Steve Spagnuolo is a great defensive coordinator is because he worries about everything. I mean, yes, he is going to stay up late at night, worrying, and he won't be worrying really because instead of worrying, he's going to be thinking about how he can stop Christian McCaffrey and what he needs to do to Brock Purdy. That's what makes him good because he doesn't ever take anything for granted, and he doesn't let his team do that either. I respect the heck out of that. That's why he's a good coach. But yes, the Chiefs, I would expect the Chiefs game plan to be almost identical to its game plan in every game that Steve Spagnuolo will ever coach for this team, which is that you win on first and second down so that you can get the quarterback in the third and long, and then you just go after him. I mean, you could be more complicated about describing Steve Spagnuolo's system, but that's it. And so that's the only thing I think that he would be eager about would be, I think that he would be very, very confident that if his defense can get Brock Purdy into third and long situations, that they will win those situations.
Yeah. Seems like a lot of 49ers fans in our comment section tonight.
There are. Let's see. Kind of answered this, so I won't spend a whole lot on it, but Cody is asking me a chance to pick up a DN for the Super Bowl like Frank. I'm with you, Nick. I mean, I don't think you really disrupt the room at this point. Your team is on the field, the practice squad wise too. I mean, it's not like you need to sign somebody that you're afraid somebody else is going to take from you. I mean, that's always possible. That hey, if you've got a free spot on the practice squad, and I mean, they could free up a roster spot with a Minihue if you wanted to put him on IR, if you could, but you got the reserve future deals. I mean, you don't necessarily have to add somebody to your room right now, so. I wouldn't want to disrupt the chemistry myself.
Yeah, no, I already answered it. So I'm in my lightning rod mode. Okay, you know where I got to go after.
There you go. I probably need to get in the lightning rod mode too. No, Dr. Ozzy, I did not see that Greg Lewis is interviewing for the Saints OC job, but I would endorse him for that. Greg Lewis, good guy, always appreciated his answers and his candidness in Kansas City, so I wouldn't have any problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm rooting for him to get the opportunity, but I'm not a big fan of where that Saints organization's headed, and I don't think that's a stable franchise. It's a great opportunity for Greg Lewis to get a chance and be able to get to his goal of being an offensive coordinator if he gets that opportunity. But I'm just telling you now, like Dennis Allen, he's not exactly the guy you want guiding that ship. And for him to already get rid of Pete Carmichael from the Peyton era and try to do something new, though, that's normally the first step of things are falling apart. So we're going to try our best until I get shown the door too. So if I was advising Greg Lewis, I'm like, hey, if you want the chance, that's cool, but just know, man, they'll sell you out in a second if they have to keep their job.
I am going to do something very unprofessional here, Nick. I am going to pose a question to you. I'm going to leave for a minute and come right back. And after that, we're going to do the lightning round. But because I know you can answer this question in probably about 60 seconds.
Okay, go ahead.
Jackson wants to know, how will Spags confuse Brock Purdy?
Look, you go ahead and do what you need to right now. I know you go attend to what you need to. I'll stall. It'll be fine. Go ahead and go, Matt. You're on yourself. There. Okay. Well, I'm out to wait. Look, I mean, I'm not fully into the tape study yet. I haven't even got to look at their Lions game yet. So I haven't really kept a ton of tabs on it other than what Baltimore did against them. So I think if you're the Chiefs, for the most part, you're going to go look at that Baltimore roster. Or that Baltimore game, and you're going to see what do they do from a coverage perspective? What do they do from a pass rushing perspective? Then you're going to go take the Philadelphia, the game against the Eagles. And even though it may not have worked out, was there anything that they did defensively that, maybe slowed them down for a whole series, since that wasn't a pretty game and the Niners were out for revenge against that one? And then you're going to take a little bit at what Joe Barry did, see if there's anything from there, especially in the first half when they slowed them down for part of that game. And you're going to look at that aspect of it. But I think above all else, the ones you really, if you're going through things, the number ones that you're trying to look at is what do their division opponents do against them? So what did the Rams do against them? What did the Seahawks do against them? Maybe on certain series, but when they had certain personnel, what were the packages that typically teams put out there against them? And then you start building off of that, and then you add that piece to the puzzle. So, for example, like the Baltimore Ravens game on Christmas night, since you've just seen the Baltimore Ravens, you look at that, see, okay, what did the Ravens do zone coverage-wise? Did they do a lot of simulated pressure against them like they did against the Chiefs? Or did they try to – how did they defend that run a little bit? Was there something from a run game perspective that they really were able to shut down Christian McCaffrey? Or how did they defend George Kittle? So – and then also the 49ers are going to go back and they're going to look at how Steve Spagnuolo went against them, what Steve Spagnuolo did in that 19 game. Is there anything that Spagnuolo's carried over that they're going to use in 2023 potentially and start trying to mark that down? And then Kyle's going to see, he's going to put it all together with what they did last year against them and then try to mix and match that. So right now, this whole week's exploratory for everybody. And I don't think the Chiefs fully have their game plan in place, and I don't think they're going to until probably Saturday. Before they leave on the plane Sunday for sure, they'll have that thing locked in. And next week, as Andy Reid has said multiple times, will just purely be about review. But I don't think that everything's set in stone yet. And I still think they're all out there one arrowhead drive looking through tape nonstop to try to compare and contrast what all those things I just talked about.
I did not catch all of that, as you know, Nick, but I know it was correct because X's and O's better than anybody. And hey, we're all going to be very transparent here. Yes, I had to go to the bathroom during a live stream, so
I didn't. It's okay.
I'm all about the transparency, Nick.
I can tell.
All right, lightning round. Looking for question marks. Missing one. I know there was one that I saw. Oh gosh, I'm missing a bunch of questions then. I know we have answered this before, but your thoughts on Sneed versus Jones if you can only keep one.
I mean, Chris, right now, I'm nervous about that knee brace he's got on, and I'm kind of curious what the story is behind that and what that's going to be down the road. With the Jerry Sneed, I would, if I'm looking at that, I want to know what's going on with that knee from what he had in training camp and how that's potentially going. Right now, Sneed is a very valuable piece, and he's made himself a very valuable piece. And the question they've got to ask themselves is, can he duplicate that performance for the next 2 to 3 years and stay healthy? If the answer to those questions is yes, then you probably invest in that, especially if the money's at a very reasonable rate. For Chris Jones, the question you got to ask is, can he get back to who he was last year? Can he get back to that? Because he hasn't been doing that this year. Now, is that because of injury or is that because of incentive? Then that's what they need to ask themselves. And then from that part of it, is there going to be guys out on the market that they can pay that help with the overall run defense more that'll essentially all collectively equal the cost of what you'd be paying Chris Jones? So, I mean, because Chris is probably still going to want $30 million a year, probably still going to ask for it. He may even get it from a team. And if that's the case, then he's probably going to have to go elsewhere to get that if that's the number he's after.
Yeah, and I will ditto that. I think everything is the exact same. At the end of the day, all things being equal, I also would favor age. So I would sign the younger player. So that would be in Sneed's favor. But like you said, everything else are all absolutely legitimate questions too. So it's not necessarily a case of everything being equal. In retrospect, as Thomas asking, shouldn't the Chiefs have used Kadarius Tony like they used Tyreek Hill in 2016 instead of labeling him a number one receiver? I will say, and and this one I am going to put on Brett Veach because he did say that during the offseason that he viewed Kadarius Tony as a number one type receiver. The other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to bring poor Justin Ross into this and say that the Chiefs as an organization did no favors for either one of those two players. And they're good people at all, but the Chiefs social media accounts and production team did not do Kadarius Tony or did not do Justin Ross any favors by blowing him up into the second coming of Tyreek Hill or maybe Odell Beckham Jr. I think I think that yeah. I think that if Kadarius Tony had been pitched as being like that, or even as a potential McCole Hardman replacement rather than a Tyreek Hill replacement, yes, I think that expectations would have been much different, and I don't know that necessarily things would have gone differently because, as you mentioned, Nick, injuries. But I don't know that the Chiefs, as far as how they managed expectations for those players, did the right thing.
Look, at the end of the day, you can whether they did or didn't use him like Tyreek Hill, I don't think matters because he wouldn't have been on the field enough for it to matter. Like he's an injury-prone player. That's what he is. That's what he's shown during his time. You are what you show, and that's what he's shown. So, in expectations, whatever you put him at, I mean, look, if you don't perform, you don't perform. So, I mean, look, I guess for me personally, Matt, with the Kadarius Tony ship, that's mentally sailed for me. Like he made his choice this past week. Move forward. It's done. It's over with. You want to debate about the trade for him and everything you can. It helped him win a Super Bowl. He made some catches, but he didn't. I don't think he has the same work ethic that Tyreek Hill did, nor do I think that he put in the level that Tyreek Hill would have. And it is what it is. It didn't get corrected. Attention to detail wasn't there. It's done.
I will co-sign that as well. Chance for us to kill two birds with one stone, Nick, because we have not talked about planning for next week. I will be at the Super Bowl next week, and you're going to see a lot of me because I will probably be trying to go live on the YouTube stream every single day with updates and what's going on from Las Vegas. So yes, you will, and we will definitely be doing a Q&A next Tuesday. I don't know your schedule, Nick. I assume that you're going to be stuck in the studio producing all the nonsense that you have to pull together because you guys have a ton of content.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be at the station producing this week. Got 6:30 shows, Road to Vegas. For me, it'd be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Then I'll have Sunday off on Sunday, and then I'll be off Monday, Tuesday, and then I'll have Road to Vegas 6:30 Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I'll be in Kansas City that entire time. So I will not personally be doing a show from Vegas. I will be in Kansas City where I produce the shows to get the paychecks and the health insurance.
And I tell you what, the Road to Vegas shows, I can attest from having been on one over the weekend and being lucky enough to being a part of your pregame and postgame shows. I learned stuff on those shows because you guys have exclusive interviews thanks to your partnership with the Chiefs of being able to get content that we can't get. So I learned things in your one-on-ones that Aaron Ladd had with some of the players coming off the podiums. It was just fantastic stuff. So if you guys are not watching Road to Vegas on KSHB 41, you are not doing it right.
You mean like Pacheco saying he was going to play this week and people were still debating it 2 days later, even after it already aired on our station, and he said he was going to play?
That is exactly right.
You mean like that?
Things exactly like
or
that.
Or Brett Beach that we had after the AFC Championship game that you mentioned in the 41 as a Mike podcast, some of the things that he said.
Exactly like that. It was great to watch, and so I encourage everybody to check it out. Has Tooney been definitely ruled out? No, not ruled out, but I don't have a ton of optimism. I don't know about you, Nick.
I mean, a pec strain or here's like we talked about on the podcast. I mean, I know that there are reports out there like some people are debating if it's a strain, some people are debating if it's a tear. Every strain is a tear. It's just a certain grade of it. So like it's just a matter of they're probably debating on the grade of if it needs surgery or not. So, I mean, like that injury hurts, and you can tell by the video he had. Well, you're watching the coach's film, how quickly his arm, he's like, oh, and then he fell backwards. Like he got a quite the jolt of pain there, and the way he kind of laid on the ground there, that looked like that hurt him a lot. And for somebody like Joe Tooney, who's played with a broken hand for pretty much half, if not an entire season, then like that that dude's got a whole nother level of toughness, and that guy just has a different mentality. So if he's not able to go, then that injury is pretty serious. And I mean, if Allegretti is in that spot, Allegretti got enough snaps in the Chargers game, got plenty of snaps against one of the toughest defensive fronts he's going to face, and he's going to be more than capable of being able to hold his own.
All right, I got one more question in the queue, and then we are out of here. Joe, compare this 49ers D-line to 2019, and I imagine you probably haven't watched the NFC Championship game, because I know you usually do that after Ravens, Chiefs, or at least your plan would be. So you're the next opponent's game. So I'm assuming you haven't probably watched that game yet. So I won't put you too much on the spot. I'm just going by the numbers, and looking at it and everything. And to me, a big difference looking at that, the 49ers, is just as far as how their production is distributed, is that I mean, Nick Bosa is obviously a beast, and he was a beast then, and he's a beast now. But their pass rush and their production seems like it's much more evenly distributed throughout the entire defense and less on the defensive line now. It looks kind of Chiefs-ish in that they get a lot of, sacks and pressures from their linebackers, from their secondary. I mean, they do maybe a little bit different things than they were doing in 2019.
I gotta tell right now, one of the biggest differences is they had DeForest Buckner back then.
Yep.
And that guy, with him and Bosa combined, like that inside-outside pressure, that was pretty wicked back then. Armstead kind of was who he was. But yeah, when you had Buckner when you had DeForest Buckner and Bosa like that, that was quite the combination that was going to give every offensive line fits. You still have Armstead, you still got Bosa. Chase Young, I mean, kind of, we'll see on that one. Hargrave, you played last year, so you're going to know what to expect from him. And they're kind of using him to try to kind of replicate what DeForest Buckner did from a pass rushing perspective. So, yeah, I mean, I'm curious whenever I get to watch it later on tonight, just how they look. Since I'm going to be locking in on them versus kind of just watching it to enjoy the overall game. And so, yeah, no, I mean, I'll be interested to see, but I mean, Buckner, I'm just saying Buckner was a whole different level of pass rusher. And that scheme under Robert Saleh, just kind of the way they had their coverages and the zones and everything, the Chiefs have had to figure out that coverage a lot more over the years, or had to figure out zone coverage a lot more over the years than kind of what they did that year. And so I think the Chiefs may not have the same level of receivers what they did in that Super Bowl, but I think they have more of a answer or map of how to create answers going against those style of coverages. And if you go back to last year, I'm going to go look at the score again at this point. The Chiefs went into San Francisco and beat them 44-23. So, they have a little bit of an idea of how to attack this defense.
And I'm glad you mentioned, Robert Saleh, because that's one of the things that does stand out to me, and that those defenses that he had, partly because of the talent, as you mentioned, they had a tremendous amount of talent up front, and especially with DeForest. I mean, they had the ability to get you pressure inside and outside. And that was really more of a front seven oriented team. Well, Robert Saleh was linebackers coach, that was his background. So I think that makes sense. Steve Wilkes is a defensive coordinator. I mean, he's a defensive backs coach. This team is much more secondary oriented, and they still have a lot of linebacker production. So it's really, to me, front seven versus back seven kind of difference. I mean, this team, I think they have a better secondary. I think they're probably just about as good as they are at linebacker as they were in 2019. I don't think their front four is as good as it was in 2019 this year. But at the same time, they're incredibly productive defensively because they get production from everywhere. And I saw a job that Steve Wilkes did in Missouri. I mean, that team really got better in the second half. So I know he can coach up players. And his first year in San Francisco probably makes it a little bit more difficult to get a feel. But got a year's full of tape that they're going to go through. And if Andy Reid can't find out anything, nobody's going to find out anything on how to solve a defense. So,
well, and they've also gone against Wilkes before, so they'll.
This is true.
They'll have They'll know. They'll know what to attack. I'm
They'll
not
know.
terribly worried about it.
Nick, I am incredibly grateful to you as always for joining me. Thank you, especially for cutting into your grocery shopping time on your day off. You are a true friend.
I try my best, Matt. So, but I gotta go though. Listen to 41 on the mic with Matt and I. Until next time, I bid you adieu.
And absolutely go watch The Road to Vegas, because Nick does a great job putting all those shows together over at KSHB 41. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And as I mentioned earlier, yes, you are going to get a boat full of content from Vegas next week. I arrive on Monday for Super Bowl opening night, so there will be video from that. I won't promise live video from Monday night, because that might just be too difficult to pull off, but you will definitely be getting some video from the players and the coaches throughout the evening afterwards for sure. I'll be at all the media availabilities that the Chiefs have Tuesday through Thursday. Do the live Q&A on Tuesday as always, and we'll try and do maybe a couple of other shows as well during the week, but you'll be getting some exclusive content from the players and the coaches, hopefully some things that you don't get anywhere else. You'll be getting it here on ChiefsDigest.com and on the YouTube page. So if you haven't hit like, subscribe, the bell, hit all of that stuff to make sure that you get the notifications and stay up to date. Thank you all once again for coming and joining us, and appreciate the great questions and the conversation in the stream. You all are wonderful. I truly value and appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. Have a great week. And if I don't see you between now and Monday, when everything kicks off in Vegas, have a great week. Thanks to everybody. Take care. And we will talk to you.